evaluation is portrayed as something we should do after the learning has been delivered. The traditional instructional systems design model, which is commonly used as a process to develop learning around the ADDIE model, which is the analysis, design, development, implementation, evaluation model, which you may be familiar with. It has E tacked at the end of it. It's as if, okay, we get all this done and then we evaluate. And sure, you can't evaluate till the program's been put in place and in use. But I've seen countless situations where after learning's been implemented, people are scratching their heads and trying to recall what the outcomes were supposed to be in the first place. And we seem to lose track of what the outcomes are through that whole rigmarole. So how possibly can we conduct an evaluation without being abundantly clear from the outset what the targeted outcome actually is, and actually have that impregnated, if you like, and reinforced throughout the complete development cycle? So with all that sort of thing in mind, next slide if you don't mind, Stephen. We sat down physically at the Learning Cafe last week, a few of us, and looked at some of the issues here. And basically, the first three points there relate to, they're outcome-based, if you like the technical terms. It's summative evaluation, but we don't like to use these big words. Let's call it, it's outcome-based. It's about analysing needs initially and making sure that we actually are developing learning interventions for the right reason. That's why there's a recent blog up on the Learning Cafe where I'm talking about bearing the term training needs analysis, because that originally that by default puts us into a training mode, and we're thinking, okay, we've got a problem and it's going to be a training problem, a training solution, and that's not necessarily the case. There's often other reasons, other problems. So we really need to be very good at analysing what the actual need is, and then locking down the expectations and understanding what success looks like. And I'll come back to that success issue in a minute because it's very important. And locking that down, actually getting everyone, all the stakeholders involved here, understanding what they can expect out of this learning and getting that locked. Understanding what needs to be measured and developing learning interventions, understanding what the expected outcomes are, whether that's a behavioural change, something like leadership, or the impact that might be reduced errors or increased sales or something like that. But having that sort of really well locked down in the first place. So that's about the outcomes. The bottom 3 points generally point to the quality-based issues, and we often forget about the formative side of things in terms of making sure that as we develop the whole learning program, we're taking into account all the other issues. So things like communication plans and implementation plans and the project management issues, resource management, learning design, all those things need to have fair and square right in front of their faces when you're developing it, what the learning outcome actually is, so we don't go off the track. So you can consider quality control as part of the evaluation process itself, and it happens right throughout the whole process. And of course the quality of learning design is important as well. Unless we get that right, unless we get our learning objectives sorted out properly, and we've got assessment items attached to those objectives which actually match the objectives, and we're not testing something we haven't taught, and we're using the right types of questions. We know when we should use multiple choice questions and when we shouldn't, and all that sort of stuff. That is so important to making sure the quality is right. So next slide, Jeevan, if you don't mind. This point I want to make here is about know how you'll know when the learning is successful, and make sure everyone else does as well. So I can't reiterate enough how important it is to make sure that you ask the question of the business, you ask the question of yourself, you ask the question of your colleagues in learning when talking about a particular learning program or plans to develop a learning program. How will we know when it's successful? what will people be doing, saying, acting, what will be happening in terms of sales or errors or whatever it might be, and then ensuring that all that actually permeates itself when we, through all the functions and all the activities within that triangle there and outside the triangle. Now, I'll put this up purely because it's sort of I think it's a way I've used to try and explain to people that the importance of the learning side of developing programs, and it hasn't got to be an e-learning program, it can be any sort of program, the technical side of things and the creative side of things. I think they're three really important pieces to consider when you're bringing all of the strategies and the learning design and audience analysis and so forth all together and think about them from a learning, technical and creative side of it. Then outside the triangle, probably one of the most important pieces there is expectation management on the bottom right-hand corner there. If people understand what's expected of them, they might be from a development perspective, or the stakeholder may be the business owner or whatever. If they know what to expect and what they can expect, then we can have a much better idea of what we can evaluate and the sort of thing that they'll expect from evaluation. Stakeholder management's important as well from the same perspective. But within all those plans, the communication plans, the risk management plan, which is actually a lot about project management, this whole issue of understanding what success means is so very important. It needs to be integrated right through it. So Jeevan, if you just take to the next slide. And we can't have a discussion about learning evaluation without talking about the, the levels of evaluation. The reason I've got this slide developed like this is because I think that the issues of quality, quality control underpin the actual learning model itself. And usually the learning model is horizontal, but that sort of indicates there's a hierarchy to it, and that also gives me problems. And anyway, let's have a quick look at this. The reaction level. We do that. Typically what I've seen is that is a sheet of paper handed out after courses, and there's a whole lot of information on that, but rarely, from what I've seen, rarely is much done with it. It's a thing that you need to know, you need to do, but it can always get lost if the tutor or the facilitator doesn't get a good rating. It usually doesn't see the light of day. But who's going to put it all together? Who's going to collate it all? And who's going to listen to it or take any action with it anyway? It doesn't happen all that well. And it doesn't give us a whole lot of information, really. The learning side of it is really around, can we demonstrate that people have actually learned something at the end of the program itself? In a classroom, that's more difficult to do than it is, say, in an e-learning program, because the e-learning program allows for people to answer questions individually on you can assess that, but in a group situation that's more difficult. Really the facilitator can just sort of get a feel from the class as to whether people have actually picked up and have actually understood the subject matter. The application level is where it starts to get really interesting, and really that's the area we really should try and focus on as a practical way of demonstrating evaluation, I think. It's really those interventions or strategies to put in place so that people can understand how to apply, or demonstrate, I should say, demonstrate how they can apply the new knowledge on the job. And that isn't often able to be done until maybe 2-3 months after the actual formal learning event. And ideally could be an assessment, an observation from a supervisor perhaps, or a manager on the job saying, yes, after 2 or 3 months, this person is now applying that knowledge to the job and is productive, is performing. So it's a focus on performance. The impact side of things, is always been a bit contentious, and you start to get more difficult as we go up the hierarchy here, I suppose. But impact being, what's the impact on the organisation? Whether that is reduced errors or increased sales or whatever else. If that is what the business wants to know about, well, we need to design and develop and evaluate at that level and be aware of it right from the very outset, that that's what they expect. If they don't expect that, well, concentrate on the application level. Phillips, Jack Phillips, he sort of set out the return on investment. That's a whole new topic. It's a whole different discussion, but that's what that's about, return on investment. A lot of it's around converting intangible benefits to tangible benefits. Then Rylett, Alistair Rylett, is an Australian guy actually from Sydney, come up with sustained and sharing the benefits. And his idea about sustained was around, well, is the actual intervention, or is the training intervention, learning intervention, is the benefits sustained over a period of time? Often we do an ROI or an impact study and it's just at a point in time. Rylett's saying, well, what about longer term? Can we demonstrate a sustained benefit? And then sharing the benefits really comes from level 7. Sharing the benefits really comes from a knowledge management perspective, where we can sit back and say, well, people enjoy that learning so much, they're now sharing the knowledge with other people. And that's true. That also could be a legitimate outcome that the business expects, or anyone expects from the learning. So that's a brief overview of it. Time doesn't this is not never kind, but that's a brief overview of where I'm coming from. Probably maybe at another webinar we can get into some more nitty-gritty in terms of how to go about all these things. But the main message I wanted to bring across was that, one, understand what the expectations are, understand what success means, and two, think about that throughout the whole of the process, right from the analysis phase right through to the point where the program is implemented and beyond, and focus on that. And I think you'll find that evaluation is a lot easier to do, and not so much mystique about it. Thanks, Jeevan. I'll hand back to you.
Oh, thank you very much, Bob. And I'm sure there will be more questions as we go along. And moving on to Melissa. Now, I'm really quite interested in hearing what Melissa has to say, because I think there are some lessons from marketing that we can apply to learning, because I think the results required from a marketing budget need to be quantified, and it's quite brutal out there. So, if your marketing campaign doesn't work, the campaign is shut down, and the only way you can determine that is obviously through sales, but also understanding the reaction from the customers. So, Melissa, over to you, and we are on the slide which says lessons from marketing for those who don't have access to a computer and participating through the telephone conference call. So, Melissa, over to you, and I'll flick to the next slide.
Thanks, Jeevan. Can everyone hear me okay? Jeevan, can you hear me all right?
Yep, I can.
Am I loud enough? Okay, terrific. It is quite brutal out there in marketing. It's marketing is very expensive, particularly if you've got a television campaign in premium primetime TV. So given that expectation the business has of evaluation, it kind of needs to match what's being spent on the advertising. So from that point of view, marketing evaluation does tend to be more robust, simply because there's a greater expectation, a greater need for it, and they have bigger budgets. So I know that a lot of this is often not possible within a learning framework. However, hopefully it's still valuable for you. So from a marketing evaluation point of view, this is really reiterating what Bob has just talked about, but it's starting with the end in mind, understanding what success means. Specifically, what does success mean? Is it sales that they're expecting to see? Is it a behaviour change, and what is that behaviour change? So it's really understanding what the desired end result is, working backwards from that. So if we work backwards from the pink square, what's the end result? For example, it might be sales. What behaviour do we need to change in order to increase those sales? To use an example, let's say we're an alcoholic brand. What's our end result? We want to increase sales. What behaviour do we need to change? We want people to drink more of our alcohol. What thinking do we need to change? We want people to know that our drink is for sophisticated men over 30 years of age, and our drink is the drink to have when you're celebrating moments of success. So therefore, what do we need to do to communicate that message? So that really tells you what your strategy should be, how you're actually going to do that, as well as where you need to evaluate and why. The important thing to know is that evaluation needs to be at each stage. So understanding, not only measuring how people feel about the ad, whether the message went through, but is that now translating to behaviour change, and is that now translating to sales? Next slide, thanks, Stephen. Okay, sorry, there was a delay there from my point of view. All right, so in marketing there's always multiple campaigns going on at the same time, which makes it difficult. And I know a lot of learning professionals also struggle with this, is how do you know that the learning is actually having an impact when there's learning, there's, we rely on managers obviously being able to recognise employees for actually applying that learning. We rely on the business actually giving employees the time, the opportunity and the right resources and support to apply that learning. So there's multiple things going on that are going to impact the success of our learning. So how do we know that the learning is actually having an impact? This is why marketers have, they set up quite robust research groups from the beginning. So your control group, which is that green box there, is people who haven't gone through or haven't seen your campaign at all. Let's say in this example you have 2 campaigns going. So if you use the example again of being an alcoholic beverage, you might have a Facebook page where you're trying to engage people under, in their 20s and 30s who are your target audience to drink more of your alcohol by engaging them interactively through Facebook. The second campaign you might have going at the same time might be an ad. So you've got these 2 campaigns happening at the same time. You want to make sure that both of those campaigns are successful, but you obviously want to see which is more successful. Which of those 2 campaigns is leading to people drinking more alcohol? So your evaluation therefore needs to consider those 2. So you need to have a control group, so they're people who aren't part of your Facebook page and haven't seen your ad. Campaign 1 only, so let's put this people be people who've only seen your ad, but they're not part of your Facebook page. Campaign 2, because it's blue, I'm going to call that the Facebook page, so people who are part of your Facebook but they haven't seen your ad. And then people in the last square are people who, yes, they're part of your Facebook and they have seen your ad. So the evaluation is about understanding what are the differences in outcomes for those 4 groups. You would hope, of course, that people who have seen your ad are going to be drinking more alcohol than people who haven't seen it. You're going to hope that people who are part of your Facebook are drinking more alcohol of your alcohol than people who are not part of your Facebook page. And you want to find out whether the 2 campaigns combined together is actually giving you an added benefit. Is greater engagement with you as a brand leading to loyalty to your brand over and above other beverages? Next slide, please, Stephen. The other thing to bear in mind is evaluation is treated with care in marketing and as part of your consumer's brand experience. I know this is a little bit different for learning, but I think it's still relevant. Respondents, from a marketing point of view, are always your best advocate. So they either already buy your product or consume your product, or they're part of your target audience. So what this means is that we don't want to put them off by putting them through research. We don't want to over-survey people. So whilst evaluation is essential, we need to bear in mind that the research process, the evaluation process, isn't actually going to impact negatively on their experience with you. This is important from a learning point of view as well, because I think evaluation can be overdone. There are surveys, surveys can be too long. We can ask people too many questions. And what that does is it kind of, it misses the point, because the point of the evaluation is to, yes, understand if the learning was had an impact, but it's also essential to recognise that this learning is still part of an employee's employment experience. So it needs to be treated with care. We don't want to over-survey people because then later on people aren't going to complete our surveys at all because they'll see there's another boring survey. So I've got a picture of a robot there because the great thing about learning evaluation is we have access to all these different technology touch points where we can actually survey employees. So in a marketing context, depending on who your target audience is, online surveys may not work for you. Whereas in learning, if you have an LMS, then you can attach an evaluation off the back of that. I would encourage you to understand where your target audience go, what they use. If they use SharePoint, then try and use that as a touch point. If they're on email a lot, then try and use that. So it's really trying to go where your target audience go, make it beneficial for them, understand that they're going to see a survey as that they're going to ask themselves, what's in it for me? Incentives don't have to be monetary. They can be information focused. But it's making sure that you treat evaluation from their point of view as well. Consider that. Next slide, Jeevan. So what does this mean for learning? The first point I've probably spoken about alongside of, but just be really clear on what's considered success from the business or client point of view, and make sure you plan your solution with this end in mind the whole way through, and considering that that is what you're aiming for. The second point is to consider external factors in your evaluation. So as I mentioned before, there are things that might help or hinder the success of the learning component of a strategy. So if you have a transformational project where there might be a change in role type, therefore there's different remuneration, different incentives, and then of course learning associated with that, there are going to be multiple things that are going to impact success of that overall project, where learning is an essential part of it. But it's making sure we understand that learning is a part of it and measure those other factors so that we can be more robust and therefore get more credibility from the business point of view that we are measuring apple to apple. The third point is to be realistic with how long it might take to see an impact. This is important because we don't want to survey people too early, and it kind of depends on what the content of the learning is. So if it's a leadership program, it might take a little bit longer before your leaders can actually demonstrate those new behaviours and new skills. If it's using a new
Hello, Melissa, are you there?
Now?
Yes, we can hear you now. Sorry. Go on.
Okay, I don't know what happened. All right, so being realistic with how long it might take. So we don't want to survey people too early because then we're going to actually, we won't have given them an opportunity to actually demonstrate those new skills and apply that knowledge. What it means from an interpretation point of view is that to us it might seem like the learning hasn't had an impact when in fact our evaluation came in too early. On the opposite end, if our evaluation is too late, we can miss out those behaviours and we could be coming out of the plateau in the bell curve. The fourth point is, again, going back to that, treating evaluation and being respectful of your respondents is only ask questions that are really necessary. I know when some people, when they do surveys, are wanting to ask everything. That's really nice to know, and I'm guilty of doing that as well. But it's really important to keep surveys as short as you can, not over-surveying people, asking questions that are only necessary, making the most of each evaluation component and each individual question. I've had projects I've worked on where there have been 5 different audiences, where there's a baseline survey, during the workshop survey, right after the workshop, a month after, 6 months after, and while you obviously want to see as much change or movement as possible so that you can understand how people's skills are changing, there needs to be a trade-off. to make sure that we're not over-surveying people. The thing to bear in mind is that you're going to lose a percentage of your respondents at each wave. So if you conduct a baseline evaluation survey and you get, which is really rare, let's say you get a 100% response rate, by the time you survey them after the workshop has taken place, and then again after they've been back in their job for a month, you're going to lose about 50% of people at each stage, which could end up meaning, depending on how many waves of evaluation you have, you can end up with a very small sample at the end of your evaluation, which can mean that you may not be able to interpret and use those results. So that's the other reason you need to bear that in mind. The last point is, as I mentioned before, leveraging existing technology and touch points where possible. I'm a fan of LMS and using that for evaluation, because what it means is you can actually track who your respondents are, what learning they've gone through, and consider that in the interpretation of your evaluation. So I hope that was helpful. That's it for me, and I think it's back over to you, Jeevan.
Okay, thank you very much, Mel, and that was quite insightful in terms of what we can learn from marketing and the brutal world of evaluation there. Look, I'm very keen to finish at the stated time of 1 p.m. and we did have another part which we were going to talk about, our experiences, current trends, challenges, best practices, workable solutions. But what I'd like to do is, the intention of this webinar is for the entire audience to participate in the discussion. So I guess I'll probably just move on to the part in which let's throw the floor open for questions and discussion. So if anybody has any question or any insight, if you just raise your hand and I will pass on. I'll unmute you, and we can ask a question. So yeah, please raise your hand or send me a chat message, and I'll with a question I'll certainly put that to the panel. While that's happening, I do have one question for. I guess Mel. Mel, you've worked in marketing, but also in Westpac Learning. I just wanted to find out the priority and the importance that's placed on evaluation in marketing versus learning. And so is there, for example, in marketing a fairly substantial budget, or it is part of the whole design, and is it recognized upfront? So how does it work in marketing, and how is it different from learning?
That's a good question. In marketing, it is the budget is automatically put aside as part of the design. You're never going to have a marketing campaign without evaluation budget put aside for that. If you're spending millions of dollars on a TV ad campaign, you want to make sure it's working for you, not against you. You want to make sure that it's not impacting negatively on your brand. You want to make sure you're not putting off your biggest adorers. So it is kind of, evaluation is, I guess, more established in marketing. It's just assumed that that's going to be part of the budget and therefore part of the process. There is an automatic working relationship between your designers, your digital marketers, your media agencies, and your market research agencies. So from that point of view, it is more established. I do think, though, learning evaluation does have a similar level of focus and robustness depending on the organisation, depending on the industry, and I think it's all about how important does the business see learning to be in meeting the needs of the organisation. I would say from working at MPS now, being in healthcare, evaluation for learning is definitely seen as something that's extremely important, because for us, the consequences of our doctors, for example, not knowing when they should be prescribing antidepressants is massive. We want to make sure that if our end outcome is, I'll go with this example of, let's say we want to reduce the number of antidepressants that are prescribed to patients for cases of mild depression where antidepressants are not necessary. We want to make sure that that's actually happening, because that can lead to quite serious consequences if it doesn't. So I think it really depends on how learning is perceived by the organisation.
Excellent. I think we've got a question from Judy. Judy, I've just unmuted you so that you can add to your question, or if you've got something else to add. But Judy's question is that I think that traditionally in event-based L&D, we have seen evaluation as quite separate from the learning process that has impacted the use and the value of evaluation techniques. Do you think that the shift away from event-based learning to more informal and collaborative learning will mean a different approach to evaluation? I'll probably pose this question first to Bob, just in terms of the the trend more towards informal learning, and then very quickly pass on to Mel about what any specific changes to the approach to learning evaluation to meet this trend away, well, from formal classroom learning to informal learning. Bob? Bob, you there? Bob? Mel, do you want to jump in?
Hello?
Yep, can you hear me?
Yep. Okay, Bob's there. So.
Sorry, I was unmuted for a minute, but I'm back again. Sorry. The question concerned different techniques or different approach to evaluation as a result of the growing recognition of informal learning. Was that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I suppose it's going to be more difficult. It's going to be it won't be as prescriptive. I really not sure how it's going to pan out, because with formal learning, where you've actually got some very specific objectives and outcomes to deal with informal learning, it's something that just sort of happens along the way. It's material that's been either developed, engineered in the form of performance support, which could be material that's available just enough, just in time for you to complete your job, or it could be collaborative sort of informal learning where you're actually sharing information with through social networking and so on. I suppose, though, at the end of the day, if an organisation allows social networking as a legitimate way to learn, and it should, within an organisation, and opens it up to people to use, it's still possible to look at it and say, well, at the end of the day, it will be successful if people are sharing knowledge. I guess it's the best. The tricky bit is understanding how successfully that's actually been done, and are people performing it at an enhanced manner because they've had the benefit of sharing information, getting information from other experts. Again, it's around about coming back to the same story, I think, about understanding the expectations and understanding what success actually is, regardless of whether it's formal or informal. Bit of a throwaway reply, but yeah, good question.
Okay, no, absolutely, and look, I think before we move on to Mel, there is obviously technology can track the usage. For example, Google Analytics we use for learning, for using the tracking for the learningcafe.com.au blog. So we know exactly how many visitors have come, where they've come from, which are the pages, from which page have they entered the site, which page have they left the site, how many minutes have they spent, and it's similar with, I guess, SharePoint sites that developed. For example, for Westpac, where you can actually track the usage, but in the absence of, it brings the whole question about, is there any value to tracking? Because on an LMS, I guess you can post a video on the LMS, and therefore you'll know who's used it, and put an assessment in the end, or you could put it on a SharePoint site so that people can use it, and how many people have used it, but you wouldn't know who it was and what they learned from it. So, I guess it's there are methods available, but probably not. I think some of the LMSs are getting there. I know there are methods of putting tracking on individual pages in online courses, for example. But from you, Mel, any thoughts on that? Very quickly, because we've got lots of questions. Yeah.
Okay, that's really fun. Firstly, I think it's a really good question. I think if that does happen, then evaluation will need to be more robust. The technology and the tracking will need to definitely enable evaluation as well. And I think it'll make, in some part, it'll make evaluation easier, because if you've already got those tools, and people are already in online environments using those tools, then evaluation can piggyback off that. However, I think it'll be more of a challenge in that because we don't have prescribed learning events, we need to obviously get visibility of what is happening, and therefore evaluation will need to have multiple stages as opposed to our single happy sheets.
Okay, excellent, excellent. The next question, I'm just going in sequence, is from Robin. Robin, I've just unmuted you. Do you want to just speak out your question?
I'd be interested in some examples where organisations have gone beyond surveys and learner impressions in evaluation, even beyond focus groups as well.
Mel? Hi, Mel, can you hear me? Yeah.
I can give you examples from, I've got examples from marketing, but not from a learning point of view. Is that still helpful?
I can give you examples from a learning perspective if you
Go
like.
ahead, yeah.
Certainly I've seen some examples where there's been a deliberate effort made and successfully carried out to ensure that the learning is designed around people being able to apply the knowledge. So we've seen classroom courses which have had pre and post activities, either online activities or offline activities, so that somebody goes to a course, let's say it's a classroom course, and then comes away from that course, and implicit within the overall design is a continuing piece where they actually deliberately practice on the job, outside the classroom, on the job, and somebody actually does an observation of that person to say, yes, that person's now performing and applying that knowledge. That's level 3 evaluation. It's Kirkpatrick's level 3. It's not hard to achieve, and from a good overall design perspective, it's what we should be doing. And it's about getting people to remember facts and figures and remember how to do processes and remember how to do procedures. Good, you can do that in the classroom, but getting people to apply those rules or those procedures and processes on the job is another matter. That's level 3, that's applying it on the job. Not hard to do, and I've seen lots of examples of that.
I'd like to add, because I kind of work in the space of business simulations, which is quite interesting, and we're running a couple of workshops for CPA Australia, where people run their own company and get financial results and share price goes up. But it's quite interesting where you can actually see that the workshop typically would be you introduce financial concepts like break-even analysis, for example, or how the BCG matrix for product selection, product metrics, and you can within those simulations you start actually seeing the results of whether what they've learned is being applied. They also have the chance of taking corrective action. So certainly I think and I know Robin personally is interested in serious games. So I think as our learning solutions become a little bit more sophisticated in the years to come, I think we'll have better ways of actually measuring or evaluating learning and if it's doing it.
Jeevan, can I just make a point there, if you don't mind?
No, absolutely, go for it.
I think that the simulation is, yes, it's a good point. You can simulate a situation, but there's so many other environmental factors that are going on in the job or on the job. Telephones ringing, people interrupting. It's a different arrangement, and I'd be reluctant to make any sort of claim that the success of somebody being successful in a simulation situation online, for example, is achieving level 3. They're not really applying it on the job in the full sense. That's all. Just a comment.
Yeah, and obviously it's not a silver bullet, but I think it kind of goes somewhere. Maybe it's 2.5 instead of 3.
It goes somewhere.
Yeah. We've actually got some interesting comments from Brad Saunders. Brad doesn't have a microphone, so I can't invite him to speak. He's got a question, but he's also got an observation. Brad, in his organization, is using informal learning for their induction process, and they've designed formal assessment of line managers at the conclusion of the learning time frame, which is 4 weeks, to establish levels of knowledge and ability on the job. So that's a fairly, I guess, intimate learning evaluation process of the people who are managing the people who've been trained or who've learned. And Brad's also added that they actually have no classroom training for product knowledge, basic job and role ability. So it's kind of all happening within the work situation. Brad also has a question. What are the panel's thoughts on utilizing external agencies to conduct formal assessments to evaluate the impact on the job? And I think that is a fantastic question because, just thinking about it, I think the very fact that the people who are responsible for the success of learning or who are producing the learning are also involved in measuring the success. So, something like an external auditor who can give a truer picture, maybe a more, not through rosy-colored glasses. So, yeah, any thoughts on that, Mel and Bob? I think it's a very interesting question from Brad.
Mel, do you want?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. It's definitely gives you that objectivity. As you said, even if you've got the same person who's been involved in developing and designing the solution, also evaluating the effectiveness of it, you're going to have bias there. So it's definitely important to do that. However, I think obviously there needs to be an understanding of the content at the same time in order to evaluate through observation. So I think need to be a little bit careful, but I think it's definitely important from an objectivity point of view.
Yeah, I agree. It sounds like a good idea. Yeah.
We've got a question from. Sorry, Bob. Go on.
No, but the other point was that's an interesting concept that was discussed there as well about the informal learning rather than formal learning for onboarding or orientation, and then an assessment after that. Very interesting. Must be a particularly good organisation to work for to be able to do that. Sounds great.
Sure.
Okay.
All right, we've got a question from David Myers. David, I've just unmuted you, so if you want to ask a question, go for it. It'll be nice to kind of hear your voice. But I've also got a question if you're unable to, if you don't have a mic. You there, David? Okay, I'll ask the question for David.
Is that better? Can you hear me?
Yeah, absolutely. We can hear you now, David. Go ahead.
Okay, so my question to the panel was, in taking evaluation into consideration, don't we have to look at the hurdle rate of cash for a business and ensure that any learning is improving the business as opposed to taking it backwards?
Okay, I think just rephrasing your question. So David, are you talking about the fact that the results of the learning should be apparent in the benefits to the business or in business results?
Yeah. So each business has a cost of money.
Yeah.
And if the programs aren't incrementing the effectiveness, then you're actually costing the business. So when do we take into consideration, the effectiveness of the learning versus the cost of cash to the business?
I think that's a great question. Just my thoughts on that is that look, first of all, it's obviously it's very difficult to quantify the link between learning and business results. Sometimes it is, but most of the times it is not. It's like for your example, let us say after a training intervention, the sales actually goes down. So is it because of learning or despite it? But certainly I think it's a great question because what you've done is you've kind of encapsulated you're looking at the big picture, right? And you're saying that the very fact that learning is happening has a cost to it, whether it be time or the time of the learners. And I've seen that happening in one of the financial services planners company where I did some work where they just wanted me to go and review and increase the amount of learning or increase the amount of number of hours, and I got back to them and said, if you do that, the time that people spend or the financial planners spend in getting business is going to get reduced. So in fact, you should be reducing your training and not increasing it. So that's just a very interesting anecdote just around that. But I'm not sure, David, if there's actually we track costs and the benefits, and obviously as Mel probably would agree and or comment on, is that the very fact that you evaluate learning has a cost to it. So evaluation costs money, it costs it needs people with the right skills. So there is a certain cost of evaluation, and for some, I guess, learning interventions in which you're not maybe it's not necessary to evaluate learning. It's okay to get anecdotal feedback, and you're kind of happy with the results, but with others you do, especially with, let's say, projects with large budgets. But I'd also, I guess, yeah. So it's a good question. I'm not sure I've got a very clear answer, but I don't know, Bob Mel, your thoughts on that?
I just think, yeah, what you're saying, David, is quite right. Training is a cost, and there's a dollar attached to it. So is marketing a cost. So is strategic planning to the organisation a cost. So is business planning. So is a whole lot of things that support the organisation to achieve its overall goals. Jack Phillips in level 5, return on investment, tries to, well, I shouldn't say tries, he's got a model that allows people to convert intangible benefits to tangible benefits. So they can put a dollar value on all the costs associated with learning, and then calculate a return on investment for that money, so that the cost of money is actually accounted for. Yeah, it can be done. A lot of people are not doing that very successfully. The other point, though, just to throw it out there a little further and looking more to the future, is that I'm a strong believer that learning and work are merging, and we learn to work, we work to learn. If we're continually learning how to learn, unlearn and relearn, it's a merging of learning, work. Probably thrown into the issue there also is learning, work. It's life, it's community. All those things are merging, and therefore I think as informal learning takes off a lot more, and we've got a lot more just in time interventions, and social networking becomes more sophisticated. It'll be just a matter of coming to work and learning by default, and I'm not sure if you'd ever put a price on that.
Melanie, thoughts? David? Okay, so, you know, I think... Yeah, sorry, Mel, go on.
Yeah, I mean,
Go on, please.
I definitely, yes, I absolutely agree that if it's not actually going to benefit the organisation, then it's, you know, you sort of wouldn't do it. From a marketing point of view, absolutely. If a campaign is not increasing sales, you wouldn't continue going down that path, particularly since it's expensive to market to begin with. I think the challenge, though, we have is I think everyone wants to evaluate to that level. The challenge we have is, first of all, lacked impact. So, you know, it takes time before you teach someone a skill and then they get to apply it, it changes their behaviour, and then that leads to an increase in organisational outcomes. So your evaluation process becomes a 18-month-long process by that point. There are other programs in place. So that's the first challenge we have. The second challenge is obviously resources. Since it takes that long, it's quite intricate work to get to that level of detail. And the third challenge is that there are always multiple things going on that are going to lead to those organisational outcomes. So if you're going to look at sales as your end outcome, there are so many things going on, marketing campaigns, other things that are going to influence sales besides what your employees have just learned. So if it's going to be done, then it needs to be done properly.
Well, I think that was the last question. I think we're past 1 p.m. So I probably want to end the webinar discussion here. Look, I think we had some great discussion, and I know there's more insights and experience within the audience itself, and we could go on for the next couple of hours discussing evaluation. But I thought it was necessary, the Learning Cafe thought it was quite necessary to have a discussion about learning evaluation, because that's something that is there in the room, but you can't see it. And certainly needs to be, needs to have more attention paid to it. So I'd like to thank everybody who turned up for the webinar, and I hope that you got some value out of this. And there will be a recording of this session available if you want to pass on the word to your friends to watch the recording. And I'd like to also thank Bob and Mel for their time and for their insights into the webinar. And yeah, so I think that's where we'll end. If you've got any questions, I've got a few more questions that have come through from the audience, but we've run out of time. So send me an email and we'll try to respond to those queries and questions. So thank you everyone, and hopefully you will turn up for the next webinar, which we'll announce the date. And if you can also sign up for the Learning Cafe weekly newsletter, which gives a summary of the blog, you'll get information about the next webinar there. So thanks Bob, thanks Mel, and thanks everyone in the audience.
Thanks, Stephen, for moderating. Thanks, everyone, for listening.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Bye.
Hey Bob, you there?
Yeah.
Alrighty. Oh, okay. Wasn't too bad for the first time. What do you think, Bob?
That was okay. It's good. Yeah.
Yeah,
What's up with that?
just made a few notes for myself actually. Just the technology bit. There were just a few hiccups, but I think discussion was pretty good, wasn't it? And
Yeah.
we've got the feedback form, which I'll go and check now if there's some feedback. But what did you think, just generally, of the
Yeah, I
format?
thought it
And
was good. Yeah, no problem. I thought it went pretty well. I'm not sure. I would have liked to have had more of a discussion with David Meyer. David's sort of been around for quite a while and knows
absolutely.
his stuff,
Yeah.
and I just sort of would have liked to have more time to talk to him. It was a really good question, and I hope that we didn't sort of dismiss it a bit. But it's a good question. It really deserves another. You could almost have a whole webinar just on that point.
We've got one feedback, Bob, from Brad Saunders from AstraZeneca. Relevance of topic very high, quality of webinar content high, webinar structure and speakers high. Is the no sales approach important? He says yes, so no selling is important. Interested in getting invites to future webinars? Yes. So that's one feedback we've got already. So that's
okay.
Yeah, look.
Okay, then.
Yeah, I mean, I guess these webinars are more about substance than being perfect. So we've got some good.
Sure.
Yeah, I think the participation I've seen in terms of questions and also some comments have come through pretty nicely. So
yeah. So what? There's about 16 people or something like that.
No, just hang on, Bob. There's a number. Let me just take this call 1 sec. Hello, Jimmy here. Oh, hi, Mel. How are you? Actually, I was just talking to Bob. Do you want to dial in? We're still there. Okay. Yeah, it's the same number. Right, we're still there, so we just kind of do a briefing. Great. So that was Mel. She's joining us back. So
Okay.
Yeah. So now I was I think. Sorry, Bob. It was about we were a total of 12. So 3 of us and 9 attendees.
Okay, well, that's what it was. Okay, the attendee list, I wasn't sure if that was just participants or whether it included the staff. Yeah.
Yeah. No,
yeah,
it certainly included us. So.
Okay. Now the other thing I couldn't actually see who those people were. Was that right?
That's fine. That's okay. As in the questions.
No. The people, the list, the names of the people who were there.
Yeah, that's right.
I couldn't see those. Could
Correct.
you?
Correct, because we decided we wouldn't make you Mel the presenter because just wanted to keep it simple.
Oh, okay, I understand.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. So it's only the presenter who can actually see that.
Correct. And the thing is that in some tools you can have multiple presenters, but in this one looks like you can only have one. So, if you're the presenter, then you've got a control of the slides and everything. just not the list.
Mhm.
So it's an all or
Okay.
none kind of an approach. So we thought we'll just keep it simple.
Fair enough.
But just in terms of the attendees list, what I was monitoring was basically if there were any questions or hands raised, and I was answering them. But oh, you
There's
mean
quite a few of them.
you wanted the names of the people who had out of the 15 who registered, which
Yeah.
ones had turned up, right? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
Maybe what I
that,
yeah. Maybe what I can
I couldn't see that. I couldn't see those on my list. All I could see was yourself and myself and Mel.
correct. No, you can't because you're not the
Okay,
presenter.
understood. That's okay.
But we could have another way of doing that by, maybe I can, let me just see if I can send you like a screenshot of the people who are, attending. That way you'll probably know who's there. But Shai was there.
Okay.
And I think,
Oh, was he? Okay.
yeah, Shai was there. Let me just see if
Olivia?
I can churn up a report. Yeah, look, I think there's a report.